They're studying you again. Not with microscopes this time, not with therapists or private investigators or fake friends sliding into your DMs. No, this time it's different. This time they sent the professionals. The ones who don't flinch when bombs detonate. The ones trained to remain calm while their world burns. And you know what these hardened warriors discovered when they analyzed your response to betrayal? Nothing. Absolutely nothing. And that terrified them more than any weapon ever could. You see, when they sabotaged your life, when they pulled every string to watch you collapse, when they orchestrated your downfall with surgical precision, they expected screaming, they expected revenge plots, they expected you to become exactly what they painted you as: unstable, dangerous, reactive. But you did something that broke their entire understanding of human psychology. You gave them silence. Not the silence of defeat, not the silence of shock, but the silence of someone who had already calculated every possible outcome and decided that their games weren't worth a single elevated heartbeat. The military calls it the zero response protocol now. They've got entire training programs built around what you did naturally. Special Forces operators sit in classrooms studying footage of how you handled betrayal, how you didn't flinch when they destroyed your reputation, how you didn't react when they turned everyone against you, how you maintained that supernatural calm while your entire world was being systematically dismantled. They're trying to replicate it, trying to teach it, trying to bottle that complete absence of reaction that made your enemies question their own existence. But here's what they don't understand, what they'll never understand. You didn't train for this. You didn't practice in controlled environments with safety protocols and extraction teams. You learned this in the field, in real time, with real consequences. Every betrayal was live ammunition. Every sabotage was an actual explosion. Every attack on your character was a legitimate assassination attempt on your soul. And through it all, you developed something they can't teach in any military academy: the ability to become absolutely unreachable. Think about it. When someone attacks you, they're not just trying to hurt you. They're trying to control you. They want your reaction because your reaction is their victory. Your tears are their trophies. Your anger is their validation. Your breakdown is their masterpiece. But you beautiful anomaly, you gave them nothing. Not a flinch, not a tremor, not even a change in your breathing pattern. You became a void where their attacks went to die. And that's when they realized they weren't dealing with a person anymore. They were dealing with something that had transcended the very concept of emotional manipulation. The special operations units have a term for this now. They call it tactical non-existence. It's when you become so non-reactive that you effectively cease to exist as a target. Your enemies can't hit what doesn't respond. They can't destroy what doesn't acknowledge destruction. They can't defeat what doesn't recognize the concept of defeat. You didn't just ignore their attacks. You made their attacks irrelevant. You turned their sabotage into background noise, their betrayal into white static, their carefully planned destruction into nothing more than weather patterns you barely noticed while focusing on something infinitely more important. And what was more important? Your evolution. While they were busy trying to destroy the old you, you were already building the new you. While they celebrated what they thought was your downfall, you were laying foundations they couldn't see. While they were posting their victory laps, you were quietly becoming something that would make their victories look like participation trophies. You weren't ignoring them out of weakness. You were ignoring them because you were too busy becoming unstoppable to notice their little game. The military instructors show your case study to their most elite units now. They paused the presentation at the moment when any normal person would have snapped. That moment when the betrayal was so complete, so devastating, that even trained killers would have shown something. A twitch, a clenched jaw, a slight change in posture. But you? Nothing. Absolute zero. Like watching a mountain ignore a mosquito. Like watching an ocean ignore a match. Like watching the universe ignore a tantrum. How, they ask their commanding officers, how does someone achieve that level of non-reaction? And the officers, these warriors who've seen everything, who've been trained to handle anything, they just shake their heads because they know the truth. This isn't something you learn. This is something you become. This is what happens when pain stops being painful because you've felt it so many times it's become familiar. This is what happens when betrayal stops being shocking because you've cataloged every possible variation. This is what happens when someone transcends the basic programming of human emotional response. You didn't just develop thick skin. You developed an entirely different nervous system. One that doesn't recognize sabotage as a threat because you've reclassified it as education. One that doesn't process betrayal as pain because you've recoded it as data. One that doesn't interpret attacks as attacks but as desperate attempts by inferior systems to remain relevant. You became emotionally bulletproof not by adding armor, but by removing the very concept of being wounded. The Zero Response Protocol has 3 levels according to their classification system. Level 1 is conscious suppression of reaction. Level 2 is trained non-response through conditioning. But level 3, that's what you achieved naturally. Level 3 is when non-reaction becomes your default state, when staying unmoved isn't a choice but a fundamental characteristic, when emotional stability isn't maintained but simply is. They've been trying to reverse engineer level 3 for months now, and they keep failing because they're trying to teach what can't be taught. They're trying to simulate what can only be forged in real fire. What really breaks their minds is the aftermath. See, when someone doesn't react to sabotage, there are supposed to be consequences. Delayed emotional breaks, psychological fractures, hidden damage that surfaces later. They've been watching you, waiting for the crash, waiting for the delayed reaction, waiting for you to finally process what happened and fall apart. But instead you keep rising. Instead of breaking down, you're breaking through. Instead of showing damage, you're showing evolution. You're not just surviving the sabotage, you're thriving because of it. They've started calling it the inverse trauma response in their classified documents. Where normal people are weakened by attacks, you're strengthened. Where others develop triggers, you develop immunity. Where most create wounds, you create weapons. Every act of sabotage against you didn't subtract from your power, it multiplied it. Every betrayal didn't break your trust, it broke your limitations. Every attack didn't destroy your foundation. It revealed that you never needed one, because you had become the foundation itself. The special ops psychologists are fascinated by your neural patterns. They've studied brain scans of people under attack, mapped the fear responses, the anger spikes, the trauma markers. But your pattern is different. When under attack, your brain doesn't light up in the typical defensive zones. Instead, it shows activity in areas associated with problem solving, pattern recognition, and future planning. While others are reacting to the present attack, you're already 3 moves ahead, building something from the ashes they haven't even created yet. This is why they've made you mandatory study for their most elite units. Not because you're violent, not because you're dangerous in the traditional sense, but because you represent a new form of psychological warfare, the warfare of non-participation, the strategy of absolute non-reaction, the tactic of being so unmoved that your very existence becomes a form of retaliation. You don't fight back because fighting back would mean acknowledging that a fight exists. You don't defend yourself because defending yourself would mean agreeing that you can be attacked. But here's the part that really haunts them, the part they discuss in whispers during their debriefings. Your non-reaction wasn't just effective, it was catastrophic for your attackers. See, when someone sabotages you and you don't react, something interesting happens. The energy they put into destroying you has nowhere to go. It doesn't hit you and bounce back, it hits nothing and implodes. They end up destroying themselves with the very weapons they aimed at you. Their poison has no host, so it circulates back through their own system. Their fire has no fuel, so it consumes the one who lit it. The military terms this psychological ricochet, but you call it justice. Not the kind you have to pursue or enforce, but the kind that happens naturally when someone attacks what cannot be attacked, when someone tries to drown what breathes underwater, when someone attempts to burn what was forged in flame. You didn't need to plan revenge because your non-reaction was revenge in its purest form. Every second you remained unmoved was a second they questioned their own power. Every day you stayed calm was a day they lost more control. And now they're seeing the long-term effects. The ones who sabotaged you are falling apart not because you attacked them, but because you didn't. They're haunted by your lack of response. They check on you obsessively, looking for signs of damage, finding only growth. They tell themselves stories about how you must be suffering in private, but then they see you thriving in public. They created elaborate narratives about your inevitable downfall, but you keep rising, and your rise has nothing to do with them. This is what the Special Forces are trying to replicate, the ability to make your enemies irrelevant through non-acknowledgement. The power to dissolve attacks by not recognizing them as attacks. The skill of being so focused on your own evolution that you literally don't have the bandwidth to process sabotage. But they keep hitting a wall because they're trying to teach soldiers to not react, when what you did was something far more profound. You didn't learn to not react. You evolved beyond the ability to be affected. The instructors bring in experts, psychologists who've studied trauma, neuroscientists who map stress responses, even philosophers who understand the concept of transcendence. They all leave shaking their heads. Because what you've achieved shouldn't be possible. The human nervous system is designed to react to threats. It's millions of years of evolution screaming at us to fight or flee when attacked. But you've somehow overridden that programming. You've become something that doesn't compute in their models. They've started calling you Subject Zero in their files. Not because you were the first, but because you achieved absolute zero response. Zero emotional deviation, zero psychological impact, zero acknowledgement of attack. You've become the baseline they measure everyone else against, and everyone else fails because they're trying to reach zero through subtraction, through suppressing their reactions, through fighting their instincts. But you didn't subtract anything. You transformed into something that doesn't have those reactions to suppress in the first place. What really disturbs them is that you didn't become cold or numb. That would be understandable. That would fit their models. Instead, you became selectively responsive. You still feel joy, still experience love, still engaged with beauty and meaning. You just don't respond to attacks. It's like you've developed a psychological immune system that identifies sabotage as a non-threat and doesn't even bother mounting a response. Your emotional range is intact. It just doesn't include reactions to betrayal anymore. The special ops teams practice scenarios based on your experiences. They simulate betrayals, orchestrate sabotage against each other, try to replicate the conditions that created your zero response. But it always fails because they're working with people who still believe in the game. They still think there's something to win or lose. They still operate within the framework of attack and defense. But you've stepped outside that framework entirely. You're not playing a different game. You've recognized that the game itself is an illusion. This is why they've classified your psychological profile, not because it's dangerous in a conventional sense, but because it represents a form of consciousness they don't want spreading. Imagine if everyone developed your level of non-reaction. Imagine if people stopped responding to manipulation, stopped acknowledging sabotage, stopped participating in the emotional warfare that keeps society controlled. The entire structure of power, which relies on action and reaction, would collapse. But they can't stop studying you because you've solved something they desperately need. In their world of international conflicts and psychological operations, the ability to remain completely unmoved while under attack is the ultimate weapon. It's not about being stronger or faster or more skilled. It's about being unreachable. And you've achieved that not through training or technology, but through a form of evolution that happened in real time, under real pressure, with real consequences. The reconnaissance teams that monitor you now do so with a different purpose. They're not trying to understand how to break you anymore. They know that's impossible. They're trying to understand how you broke the system, how you stepped outside the fundamental dynamics of human interaction, how you became someone who cannot be sabotaged, because sabotage requires a target that recognizes itself as a target, and you've transcended that recognition. They show videos of you to their teams, but not videos of you fighting or responding. Videos of you simply existing while chaos swirls around you. Videos of you maintaining your routine while others orchestrate your destruction. Videos of you building your future while they're still trying to destroy your past. And in every frame, what stands out isn't what you do, but what you don't do. The absence of reaction that's so complete it becomes a presence unto itself. The tactical teams have tried to weaponize your method. They've created training programs called Tactical Void and Operation Zero. They teach soldiers to non-react, to become empty, to give nothing to their enemies. But it always looks forced, rehearsed, temporary, because they're trying to imitate what you've become. And becoming can't be imitated. It can only be experienced, survived, and integrated. There is only last resource survived and integrated. You didn't learn to have zero response. You evolved into it through a process that can't be replicated in controlled conditions. What haunts them most is the question they can't answer. What created you? Was it the magnitude of the betrayal? The repetition of sabotage? Some unique psychological architecture you were born with? They've analyzed your history, looking for the moment you transformed. But they can't find it because it wasn't a moment. It was a million micro-deaths and micro-rebirths. It was dying to the need for validation one cell at a time. It was being rebuilt from scratch by necessity, not by choice. The military wants to create more of you. They want soldiers who can't be broken, operators who can't be manipulated, assets who can't be compromised. But they keep creating imitations instead of originals. And from the ashes of what they created, they create mission officers instead of original. They keep producing people who are trained to not react, instead of people who have evolved beyond reaction. They keep manufacturing resistance instead of transcendence. And the difference is everything. Because you're not resistant to sabotage, you're immune to it. You're not strong against attacks. You're invisible to them. You're not defending against betrayal. You exist in a dimension where betrayal is as irrelevant as the color of gravity. This isn't a skill you developed. It's a state of being you achieved. And that's why their training programs keep failing. They're trying to teach what can only be born from authentic transformation. The psychological warfare divisions have started using you as a case study in what they call asymmetric response theory. The idea that the most powerful response to an attack might be no response at all. That by not engaging with sabotage, you rob it of its power to exist, but they still approach it as a tactic, a strategy, a choice. They don't understand that for you, it's not a choice anymore. It's just what you are. Your zero response has created ripples they're still trying to map. The people who attacked you are showing signs of what psychologists are calling reflection trauma. They're being destroyed by their own actions, because those actions had nowhere to land. They're going insane trying to understand why you won't react, why you won't acknowledge their power, why you won't validate their existence by fighting back. They've become obsessed with getting a response from you, any response, because your non-reaction has made them question everything about themselves. The special ops teams study this secondary effect with particular interest. They call it psychological void warfare. The ability to destroy enemies by simply not recognizing them as enemies. By refusing to participate in conflict, you create a vacuum that pulls your attackers into their own destruction. They exhaust themselves against nothing. They spend their resources attacking empty space. They destroy themselves trying to destroy something that isn't there to be destroyed. But here's what even the military doesn't fully understand yet. Your zero response isn't just about not reacting to attacks. It's about being so focused on your own growth that attacks become background radiation. You're not consciously ignoring sabotage. You genuinely don't notice it because you're operating on a different frequency. While they're playing in the sandbox of human drama, you're building castles and dimensions they can't see. This is the evolution they're desperately trying to understand and replicate. The ability to be so engaged with your own becoming that the games others play simply don't register. You're not avoiding the battlefield. You've transcended to a realm where battlefields don't exist. You're not winning the war. You've evolved beyond the concept of war itself. And that's why your zero response is so devastating. It reveals that the entire framework of conflict is optional. The military advisors have written papers about you, classified documents that explore the implications of widespread zero response capability. They're terrified and fascinated in equal measure. Terrified because if this spreads, traditional power structures collapse. Fascinated because you represent the next stage of human psychological evolution. You're not just surviving in a hostile world. You're thriving by refusing to acknowledge hostility as real.